this again, and hopefully it won't get taken down. And we're gonna probably muddle through the names, probably less so than last time. This is about the fourth time I've read it, and hopefully it will stay up. The Jewish War on Christendom, from the Crusades to the Bolshevik genocides, a comprehensive historical account of Jewish responsibility for the extermination of over 94 million Christians in the 20th century. The 20th century turned into a massive graveyard for Christians. Under the red flags of Bolshevism and the communist systems that spread from it, over 94 million Christians were wiped out on purpose. 66 million Russian Orthodox people disappeared into the Soviet nightmare. 7 million Ukrainian Greek Catholics and Orthodox believers starved during the Holodomor. 1.5 million Armenians died in the Ottoman death marches and later in Soviet purges. 10 million Chinese Protestants and Catholics got crushed under Mao's rule. These deaths were not just accidents from some political ideas or fights between classes. They were the carefully planned and end result of a thousand-year Jewish attack on Christianity. It started with the pain from the Crusades, got backed up by the hatred in the Talmud, and received money from the Rothschilds family, and was carried out by Jewish leaders who used Marx's idea like a new version of their religious book without God. The proof shows up in records soaked in blood. There are lists of leaders, church papers that were taken away, grain orders that sealed people's fate, and lists of people shot, and the quiet, empty spaces in villages where no church bells would ever ring again. Everything began in 1096. Christian soldiers on their way to Jerusalem for the First Crusade stopped in the Rhineland area and attacked Jewish towns with terrible anger. The Chronicle of Solomon Bar Simson, no P, Simson, is an original Jewish record that describes the awful events in Mainz, Mainz. It says, "They rose up against us like lions. 12,000 souls were slaughtered in a single day. In Worms, 3,000 more died." That's another town, weird name, Worms. In Speyer, another town name, Speyer. See, I can't do this through the whole thing, and the names are going to get ridiculous. So be ready for however I spit them out. In Speyer, 900 lost their lives. People set synagogues on fire, ripped up Torah scrolls, and either forced children to become Christians at the point of a sword or killed them against walls. The Chronicle of Rabbi Eliezer, Eliezer Bar Nathan, Rabbi Eliezer Bar Nathan cries out, "The Crusaders came with their crosses and their swords, and our blood flowed like water." This killing went on for hundreds of years. In 1190, the massacre in York trapped 150 Jews inside Clifford's Tower, and they chose to die rather than to change their faith. England kicked out 16,000 Jews in 1290. Boy, I am dyslexic. England kicked out 16,000 Jews in 1290 and took all their things. Spain forced 200,000 out in 1492 with the Alhambra decree, and many died while trying to leave. These events were not just random acts of hate, they formed a clear system of government-approved Christian war against Jews. The pain from all this turned into a basic rule for survival. Never be weak again, only gain total control over money, news, and political changes. The Crusades didn't protect the cup of Christ. And some believe it's a bloodline, but I do not. But nonetheless, your Crusaders, yeah, we'll just, yeah, leave the Masonic stuff out, right? The main ideas behind this came from the Talmud. One part in Gittin 57a says, "Onkelos summoned Jesus. He is being punished by boiling in excrement." In the Sanhedrin 43a claims, Jesus was hanged on the eve of Passover for practicing sorcery and leading Israel astray. Shabbat 116a orders, "The books of the Minim, which are Christians, may not be saved from a fire. They must burn." These lines are not hidden or unimportant. They are key lessons taught in regular Jewish schools. Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz is a top expert on the Talmud, and he says these passages are studied and debated to this day. When Karl Marx said in 1844 that religion is the opium of the masses, he was not leaving Judaism behind. He was turning the Talmud's dislike into everyday political talk without religion. Leon Trotsky, one of the worst, the Trotskyites. We kind of have those wandering around our country right now, in my opinion. It's not socialism. Socialism is like communism light. The cumulative death toll of socialism, communism, and Marxism is over 600 million. Do you really think that's a prudent idea to, anyway? Anyway, the Orthodox Church is the most, anyway, Leon Trotsky said the same thing in 1919. The Orthodox Church is the most dangerous enemy of the revolution. We must turn Russia into a desert populated by white trash. The original Torah got swapped for Das Kapital, but the deep anger stayed at home. Christian laws kept Jews from owning land or joining most job groups, and they also took over lending money with interest. That was the one business Christians were not allowed to do. By the 1700s, the Rothschild family ran most of Europe's money matters. Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R, Amschel Rothschild started the family bank in Frankfurt in 1744. Wow. Y'all realize Prince William is Jacob Rothschild's boy, right? That's why Diana had to die in the tunnel. Nobody could ever find it out. Just look at old pictures. You can look at a number of things, but I superimposed them over each other. It's a picture of King Charles in his new portrait that looks satanic, that has the head of Satan in the middle of it when you double it up and mirror image it. And in that video, you will see, superimposed, spitting image of Jacob Rothschild William is, and he's in line to be the king. Anyway, his son Nathan in London paid for Britain's fight against Napoleon in 1815. Made a huge amount of money in just one day. You thought Prescott Bush was the first to fund both sides. The Morning Post newspaper in London wrote on July 21st, 1920, the Rothschilds financed every major revolution since 1848. Again, the Morning Post newspaper in London wrote on July 21st, 1920, the Rothschilds financed every major revolution since 1848. The connection is easy to see. Jewish money led to unrest and then to the deaths of Christians. The Rothschild family gave loans for the 1848 revolts all over Europe. That was not kindness. It was money put in to break down kingdoms run by Christians. We also had a civil war around that same time, and so did Italy. Funny, isn't it? Anywho, this is a long article for the two people that are actually watching. It will be going on for quite some time, just a warning. The 1917 Central Committee had 21 members and 6 were Jews. Those were Trotsky, Zinoviev, oh my goodness, Kamenev, Sokolinov, Sverdlov, and Uritsky that made up 28.6% of the leaders. Jews were only 4.2% of the people in the Russian Empire based on the 1897 consensus. Currently, there's almost equal numbers of Jewish people living in the United States as there are the Middle Eastern state of New Jersey, about 7 million. So we're basically enslaved. Lock, stock, and barrel they own us. 2.5% of our population. You don't want to pay reparations to 13.5% of the population. Well, granted, that never lived under the whip, but their ancestors were promised 40 acres and a mule. So you don't want to pay reparations to the people whose ancestors were promised 40 acres and a mule, but you want to be slave to 2.5%. That's interesting. The first Soviet Union, I'm not calling for reparations. We've all been living under the same whip and serving the same master for a long time, whoever stopped viewing. The first Soviet government had 15 top officials called People's Commissars, and 11 were Jews. That was 73.3%. The Cheka was Lenin's secret police, and 12 of its top 20 leaders were Jews. That came from 60%. Wow. So 60 and 70%, they controlled everything, right? Robert Wilton. How many dual citizenships do we have inside the beltway of affluent criminals? How many? I think it's 87 dual citizenships. How many have allegiance to AIPAC? Anywho, Robert Wilton was a British reporter in Petrograd, And he wrote, in the last days of the Romanovs in 1920, of the 62 members of the Bolshevik state executive, 43 were Jews. The same setup went on way past the first grab of power. In November of 1917, the All-Russian Congress of Soviets approved the Bolshevik control, and Jews took 31 out of 62 spots on the Central Executive Committee. That was a full 50%. Maxim Litanov led the Office for Foreign Affairs, and he was born Mayor Wallach. M-E-I-R, Mir Wallach. Karl Radek ran propaganda, and he was born Karol with a K, Sobelson, S-H-O-N. I guess these are their Jewish names that they adopted. When he says he was born, I don't know. That's so weird. Courts that decided death for white army officers and church leaders had mostly Jewish judges like Lakov Belenky and Naftali Frankel. Frankel later created the money-making system for the Gulag camps. The Gulag Archipelago. Oh, and how we burned in the camps later when we thought if they would have been concerned about coming home to their families that night, how we wouldn't probably be here. Anyway, John Reed was an American writer who saw it all in Petrograd. He said, 10 days that shook the world. The Jewish element was everywhere in the revolutionary committees. The large number was not just numbers on paper, it meant real control. Jewish Bolsheviks ran the newspapers, sound familiar? The banks and the groups that shot people. Latvian soldiers protected Lenin and killed the Romanov family. And the Jewish officers, like Eduard Berzin, led them. First camps for prisoners started in 1918 on the Solovetsky Islands, and the Fyodor Eichmanns ran them. He was Jewish and answered to Yakov Peters, who was second in command at the Cheka. The same thing happened in every area. Mikhail Vikman headed the Cheka in Odessa. Isaac Schwartz did it in Kiev. A British government report called the White Paper on Bolshevism that came out in 1919, and it gathered spy information that said the majority of the leading figures in the Soviet government are Jews. Winston Churchill wrote an illustrated Sunday Herald on February 8, 1920, with the notable exception of Lenin, the majority of leading figures are Jews. The part played by the Jews in the Russian Revolution is certainly a very striking one. The takeover was not done by Russians. It was Jews grabbing the Russian government. Leon Trotsky was born Lev Davidovich Bronstein, and he had led the Red Army. He gave order number 171 in 1918 that said, execute without mercy all priests, monks, and nuns who resist Soviet power. 50 Orthodox bishops died because he ordered it directly. Genrikh Yagoda ran the NKVD from 1934 to 1936, and he arranged close to 40,000 churches. He closed 40,000 churches and hundreds of thousands of church workers. Lazar Kaganovich was Stalin's Jewish helper, and he watched over the famine in Ukraine himself. Yakov Sverdlov was the chairman of the All-Russian Central Committee, and he signed papers to kill thousands of priests. But men, they were not small players. They built a system of death. Trotsky wrote letters that showed how much he hated the church. In 1920, he told the Politburo that the clergy must be exterminated, root and branch. Their property must be confiscated to the last kopeck. Files from Yagoda's NKVD that opened a bit in the 1990s list set numbers for killing church leaders. They were 28,000 in 1937 alone. Kaganovich went by Iron Lazar, and he bragged in 1930 talk in Kharkiv, we will break the spine of the Ukrainian church. Well, they broke their own spine because they outlawed Christianity. And isn't it funny how an evangelical Christian country is funding Ukraine, money laundering capital of the world. I hope everything's working. Money laundering capital of the world, human trafficking capital of the world that outlawed Christianity. So here we are, evangelical Christian nation funding a scumbag country like Ukraine that doesn't believe to war against another Christian superpower. So one Christian superpower using a scumbag to war against another Orthodox Christian superpower. Makes a lot of sense. Kind of like what's going on right now. Like, isn't it funny that the one faith that envisions Christ burning in a cauldron of poo in the third temple that they want to so desperately erect is trying to basically foment a holy war between the two faiths that actually revere Christ and Moses. I notice only one person's watching now. I got up to 4. You know, when people hear something they don't want to hear, they tune out real quick. It's like, it's always based on something I say. Anyway, bye. Now I'm at 0. Okay, cool. I like being at 0. Saved by 0. All right. Sverdlov put his name on the order to kill Metropolitan Vladimir of Kiev in 1918. That was the first big church leader of the new government murdered. Moshe Uritsky was a Jewish Bolshevik who led the Petrograd Shaka. And he questioned Patriarch Tikhon in person. He also told men to rob Alexander Nevsky Lavra, and the names kept going. Solomon Lavrovsky handled labor groups. Adolf Joff worked out the Brest-Litovsk treaty that gave away land of Christians to Germany. Grigory with an I, Grigory Solokonov, like I said, these names are tough, made the money that lost value fast and made farmers go hungry. Workers and farmers did not run the revolution. A group of smart Jews who learned in places like Swiss coffee shops and German schools did. Bankers in New York, like Jacob Schiff, sent $20 million to the Bolsheviks in 1917. That comes from a U.S. State Department paper. The takeover finished, and the attack on Christianity had its main leaders ready. Soviet repression of Russian Christians. The killing of Russian Christians happened in planned steps. The Red Terror from 1917 to 1922 used guns, water, and knives to end 2 million lives of believers. A made-up famine in 1921 and to 22 took 5 million more. The kulaks, remember? And the government grabbed grain from churches under Lenin's rule. Taking land from better-off farmers, called dekulakanization, from 1929 to 1933 killed 15 million Christian farmers labeled as kulaks. I know a lot of you have heard about the kulaks. The Great Purge in 1937 to 1938 shot 1.5 million people, and that included 20,000 priests. The Gulag system of camps took in 42 million from 1930 to 1953, and most were Orthodox Christians who died working in coal mines or in far forests. Alexander Solzhenitsyn lived through the camps, and he wrote the Gulag Archipelago, and I suggest every one of you read it, because it might soon become your reality. The pits were so full of corpses that the guards had to stamp them down to make room for more, he said. The attacks were not all over the place. They followed a careful plan, like a church service, but for evil. What's Palantir all about? Palantir, Palestinian targeting software, running your government stuff, now even helping the IRS, now intertwined with the national health system in the United Kingdom. Anyway, in 1918, the Cheka sent out circular number 37 that said to end all church groups in 2 weeks. Places where monks lived became jails. Nuns faced rape and then bullets in their own yards. In 1919, people dishonored the bones of Saint Sergei of Radonezhe, whatever, and carried them through Moscow to make fun of holy walks. The 1922 effort to take valuable things from churches led to 7,100 recorded deaths of church leaders who fought back. Bishop Tikhon in Voronezh, again, there's that Voronezh, I guess, got boiled in hot tar. Wow. In Astrakhan, 42 priests drowned the Volga River. 42 priests got drowned in the Volga River with rocks around their necks. Wow. 1929, law on religion stopped all teaching for young people in Sunday classes, and help from churches. By 1939, only 500 churches out of the 50,000 from before the revolution stayed open, and the NKVD watched them closely. A census in 1937 that the government hid later showed 57% of the people still said they were Orthodox. The answer was the Great Purge that went after believers as dangers to the state. NKVD order number 000447 made rules for numbers. This one's interesting. A quota. 10 killings for every 100 arrests in county areas. Whole towns in Tambov and Kursk got sent to Kazakhstan because they would not give up their belief. The Solovetsky camps started the Gulag idea, and by 1923 it held 20 bishops and 400 priests. Most died from shots in 1937 in the monastery operation. Vorkuta mines took 2 million believers. Komaya gold areas took 3 million more. The huge number of deaths was not an extra bad thing, it was the main goal. The Soviet government worked like a machine against Christians, and that the Jewish people who planned it knew just what they made. On January 23rd, 1918, Lenin made a decree to split church and state. And it took every church thing. That meant land, buildings, pictures, and bells. 3,000 priests died in the first year. The martyrology of the communist yoke says Lenin wrote a secret note to Molotov on March 19th, 1922 that said, "The greater the number of reactionary clergy and reactionary bourgeoisie we succeed in executing, the better." By 1930, 98% of churches in the countryside sat empty and got used for storage, movies, or animal homes. Patriarch Tikhon of Moscow went to jail in 1922 and died. Watched at home in 1925, his last words were, "The church is being crucified." The attacks got worse under Stalin, but the plan started with Jews. Gendrich Yagoda's NKVD put out Order Number 0057 in 1935 to fully end church workers. The years 1937 to 1938 under Izhov had a Georgian leader, but the Jewish helpers like Mikhail Franovisky and Leonid Zavrutsky did the work. Butovo shooting ground near Moscow turned into a place of Christian suffering. 20,000 died there in 1 year, and machines pushed bodies into big holes, like they did in Gaza. Sandmark Forest in Karelia took 9,000 people in 1937. 1,100 were church leaders. Government papers that opened for a short time in the 1990s showed 85% of those killed in the Great Purge faced charges of religious agitation. The fight against Christianity was not a small part of communism. It was the heart of it, and the Jewish Bolsheviks acted like its top religious figures. Ukrainian famine. 7 million starved for their faith. In 1932, Moscow told Ukraine to give 7.7 million tons of grain, even though the harvest only made 4.1 million. A law from August 7th, 32, said leaving your village could mean death. 37,000 villages got put on a bad list. Teams took seed, animals, and all home food. Ukrainian government records show 2,500 times people ate each other in those areas. Ukrainian government records show 2,500 times people resorted to cannibalism. Wow. A hidden NKVD report from Kharkiv in 1933 said in one village a mother killed her child and salted the flesh for winter. The famine did not come from bad weather. It was a tool to kill. Stalin's rule in December of 1932 said to take all food, even seed, for the next year's plants. Teams used long metal sticks to poke floors and walls for hidden grain. In Vinnytsia, 78% of homes lost everything. 40,000 NKVD soldiers closed the border to Russia, and they shot anyone trying to run. The whole Ukrainian land outside cities became one huge prison camp. In Kharkiv, 254 children with no parents ate grass in March of 1933. A teacher in Poltava said kids fell in her class from no food. The government sent 1.8 million tons of grain out to the country in 1933 while people inside died of hunger. A U.S. group on the Ukraine famine started in 1985 and said that Holodomor was a man-made famine and premeditated. The plan hit religion along with the nation. Churches in Ukraine looked like places to fight back. Priests who gave food got shot for sabotage. Again, priests who gave food got shot for sabotage. The Ukrainian Autocephalous Orthodox Church started again in 1921 but got destroyed. 90% of its leaders went to jail by 1930, and the Greek Catholic Uniate Church in Galatia lost 80% of its priests. The famine killed faith the same as it killed the people. Lazar Kagnovich was Stalin's Jewish helper, and he ran the whole thing from his train in Kiev. Veslovad Belinsky led the NKVD in Ukraine and had a Jewish mother. He told the teams that closed off the areas. NKVD papers inside from Kharkiv Oblast say that 38% of officers were Jewish. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church stood for fighting the government, and it got wiped out. 3,000 priests went to jail in 1930, and by 1932, none of them worked in Kiev. Kaganovich did things himself. He visited group farms in January of 1933 and told men to kill 400 saboteurs in one day. Belitsky sent messages to Moscow that bragged about breaking the Gulag backbone. Israel Pliner was a Jewish NKVD officer who ran things in Venestia, and 10,000 died there for keeping grain. The famine was not just Ukrainians hurt by Russians, it was Christians hurt by Jewish orders. The 7 million who died were not numbers. They were people who died for their belief in a fight against the cross. Armenian genocide in the Soviet power policy. In Armenia, first Christian nation on the globe. And St. Bartholomew was splayed? Bartholomew. You know who that is, right? One of the disciples. Flayed, skinned alive for converting the Armenian king to Christianity. Still slaughters going on there. I'm not going to start because I won't stop. I need to finish this article, but I can tell you that Al-Jilani, who had a $10 million reward on his head, all of a sudden gets, brought in the back door of the White House, Trump's backdoor man, and he's still beheading Christians and Alawites. But then at the same time, we said we were going into Africa to help Christians, but then you had Al-Jilani in the back door, a guy who's literally beheading Christians and Alawites. This was the same period of time. Anyway, the three young Turk leaders, Talat Pasha, Enver Pasha, and Jamal Pasha, made death walks that killed 1.5 million Armenian Christians. Secret Jewish Donmei people from Salonika had power in the Committee of Union and Progress. Records from the Armenian Patriarch in 1919 list Jewish go-betweens who set up the moves and took church things. U.S. ambassadors Henry Morgenthau said the Turks used Jewish agents to carry out the worst atrocities. The killing started on April 24th of 1915 when 235 smart Armenians got arrested in Constantinople. By 1916, 1.2 million walked to the Syrian desert, and only 200,000 lived. People burned churches and nailed priests to their own altars. David Bey was a Donmei leader and money minister, and he took Armenian bank money. Jewish sellers and Trasman records show that they sold Christian children with no parents into slavery. A German official in Ezrum said Jewish leaders ran the killings. The setup was obvious. Destroying the first Christian country was not just Turkish pride in their nation, it fit into the long attack on Christians. After the Soviets took over in 1920, Lavrenti Beria had possible Jewish family roots and ran the 1937 purge. It killed 1,700 Armenian smart people and Catholics. Catholicos Koran, and smart people. Yeah, I don't know what they're talking about back then. We don't have smart people now. And anyway, the old Christian land got choked 2 times. First by Muslim leaders without religion, then by Bolsheviks who hated God. The same secret force touched both. The Soviet time was just as bad. In 1921, Treaty of Moscow gave Armenian land to Turkey, so people who lived stayed without homes. Stalin's 1936 constitution ended the Armenian church's right to exist by law. The first Christian nation on the planet. Wow. Stalin's 1936 constitution ended the Armenian church's right to exist by law. Beria's NKVD put 1,400 church workers in jail by 1937. Only 40 came out of the Gulag. Oh my goodness. The Eshmazin Cathedral closed in 1938 and its valuable items got melted. The Armenian killing was not one thing. It lasted 100 years of ending lives, and Jewish people were part of every step. Christian persecution in China. We're getting there. I'm probably about halfway through. Mikhail Borodin was born Mikhail Grusenberg, and he came as a Comintern worker in 1923. He helped form the Chinese Communist Party with Zhao Enlai. Otto Braun was another Jewish planner who helped. I know you know that name. Otto Braun was another Jewish planner who helped Mao on the Long March from 1933 to 1939. The Soviet way with Jews high up got sent over completely. Stop to interject something. Oh well, never mind. Nobody's listening anyway. What's the point, right? Chinese Communist Party came from the Soviets. Did you hear that? The Chinese Communist Party came from the Soviets. Borodin wrote the first rules for the CCP in 1923. Gregory Voitinsky was a Jewish Comintern worker who picked Mao for the first Congress. The Whampoa Military Academy trained the Red Army, and the Soviet money paid for it. Jewish officers like Mikhail Dravtin gave advice. Braun planned the long march path and said to take things from mission places. The Soviet plan of attacks on religion, group farms, and cleanouts moved over as is. The Great Leap Forward made 45 million die of no food from 1958 to 1962. So, yes, as we were wearing leather jackets and bobby socks. That's what was going on over there. 45 million people died of no food from 1958 to 1962. Bet you didn't know that. Christians were 3% of the people, and that meant 1.35 million died right away. The Cultural Revolution killed another 1.6 million who believed, and campaigns against missionaries sent 5,000 foreign priests out into 1951 and tore down 90% of churches. One more time. Campaigns against missionaries sent 5,000 foreign priests out in 1951 and tore down 90% of the churches. Deaths that were not direct, like working believers' death in the Lagoi camps or kids telling on parents for praying, made them Christian. Oh my goodness, this is like a word scramble. One more time. Deaths that were not direct, like working believers to death in Lagoi camps or kids telling on parents for praying, made the Christian total 10 million. Frank de Kotler's book, Mao's Great Famine, uses inside CCP papers that say religious elements must be liquidated without mercy. The attacks followed a system. In 1950, the three self-patriotic movements started to control Protestant churches. Pastors who said no, they went to Lagoi. And the Catholic Legion of Mary got called bad against the revolution. In 1951, and 10,000 members went to jail. In the Cultural Revolution, Red Guards broke 5,000 churches in Beijing by itself. In Shanxi, 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 anyway, in Shanxi, 400 nuns walked naked in the streets before they died. Laogai, I don't know, camps had 200,000 Christians by 1970, and only 20,000 lived. All this was going on in the 50s up to the 70s, guys. Pay attention. The attacks were not by chance. They followed the Soviet way, and the Soviet way started with Jews. The 10 million Chinese Christians who died closed the book on the Bolshevik fight against the cross. I'll take this time to interject something. Stephanie wrote a poem, and the way she said it was Stephanie Green, Substack, Forever Young. Hitler, Pol Pot, Stalin, or Mao, what makes it any different now? When they disarm people, that's when the megadeth begins. The tactics haven't changed. None of it's changed. They're still doing false flags like they were doing back in the mid-1800s. They're still using all the same tired-ass game. Synthesis. The Jewish anti-Christian continuum. The connection cannot be argued away. The Crusades gave the reason, the Talmud gave the teaching, and Rothschild money gave the tools. Bolshevik leaders did the killing. Comintern workers spread it. From fires in the Rhineland to villages in Ukraine where people ate each other. From Armenian walks to death to Chinese Lagoi camps. The same thing happens time and time again. Jews show up too much in control spots. Christian groups get picked out to end. Christian dead add up to millions. Communism was never for regular workers. It was Talmud ideas without God. Jewish payback hidden in red beliefs. The 20th century was the last crusade, but not with armored knights. It had leaders in leather coats. Christendom did not win. 94 million graves proved the other side of the victory. By the end of this, nearly 94 million Christians have been slaughtered in the eternal war of Christendom and Jewry. Never forgive and never forget, the greatest genocide in history. Yep. There you have it.